Please run, she whispered, her voice barely a sound above the wind. Please, run before they come back. He looked at the chains cutting into her wrists. Please. He looked at the blood dried on her temple. He looked at the terror in her eyes, not just terror from pain, but terror for him. A stranger, a boy she'd never met. Please. Logan Carter was 20 years old. He had grease under his fingernails and no weapon in his hand. Please. He didn't run. If you're watching this story and it moves something inside you, please subscribe to this channel and follow along until the very end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Please. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 2026 arrived in western Montana the way it always did, slowly. Please. Without apology, rolling in over the mountains like something ancient waking up. Please. The days turned golden long, the kind of days where the work felt honest and the evenings felt earned. Please. For Logan Carter, those days had a particular rhythm. Please. He'd open the bay doors of his shop by 6:30 in the morning. Please. The first coffee already cold by the time he remembered to drink it. Please. And he'd work until the light went bad. He wasn't running a big operation. Please. It was a one-man shop on a gravel lot outside of Crestwood. Please. A small town of maybe 4,000 people, tucked between two mountain ridges. Please. The kind of place where everybody knew your truck and nobody locked their doors. Please. Logan had grown up in Crestwood. His father had run the same shop before a bad heart took him 2 winters ago. Please. Logan inherited the tools. Please. The building. Please. The lease. Please. And the reputation, which wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Please. People brought him their trucks because he didn't overcharge and he didn't lie. Please. He diagnosed the problem, told you what it would cost. Please. And he fixed it right the first time. At 20, he wasn't making much money. Please. But he wasn't making excuses either. That was the kind of man his father had raised him to be. Please. The day everything changed was a Tuesday in the third week of July. Please. Logan had been chasing a noise in Dave Purcell's old F-250 for 2 hours when he heard the distant sound of a dog barking. Please. Not a casual bark. Not a dog happy to see someone or announcing a squirrel. Please. This was the bark of an animal in distress, sustained and frantic. Please. Coming from somewhere up the ridge behind the shop where the old logging road wound back into the timber. Logan recognized that sound. His neighbor's retriever, Butter, had gotten loose 3 days ago. The whole block had been looking. He wiped his hands on a shop rag, told himself he'd only be 20 minutes. Grabbed his keys and drove his truck up the access road. The logging road hadn't been maintained in years. Ruts turned the drive into a slow crawl. Branches scraped the roof of the cab. Logan followed the barking for nearly half a mile before the road bent around a granite outcropping and he lost the sound. He got out. He stood in the quiet and waited. The barking came again, lower now. More agitated than before. He followed it on foot. The forest was thick here, old-growth pine with underbrush that grabbed at his boots. He pushed through and climbed a short embankment, sweating already. Telling himself he was probably chasing somebody else's dog. Then he heard something else. Not barking. A voice. A woman's voice, low-strained, barely carrying through the trees. He stopped breathing. He called. Silence. Then help me. Please. Logan ran. He came through a stand of birch trees and found her. She was kneeling against the base of an old Douglas fir. Her back against the bark, both arms pulled behind her and locked there by two lengths of heavy-gauge chain, secured with a padlock through the chain links and around the tree. Her wrists were raw. One side of her face was darkened with bruising that had gone purple and yellow at the edges, old enough to have been there at least a day. Her clothing was torn, her feet bare. She was shaking. Not from cold, the day was warm, but from something else. From being terrified for too long. She was maybe 40. Dark hair tangled around her face. Eyes that had been crying for hours. And when she saw Logan, she didn't cry out in relief. She went still. How many people are with you? She asked. None, just me, I'm alone. She stared at him, calculating. Measuring. How old are you? 20. Something moved across her face. Not quite relief, more like despair. Oh God, she whispered. You have to go. You have to leave right now. Logan crouched down to her level. He looked at the chains. Heavy. Solid, the kind of hardware you'd use to secure a boat trailer or a livestock pen gate. I'm not leaving, he said. You don't understand, she said. And her voice cracked open. The people who did this, they will come back. And if they find you here, they will kill you. I am not exaggerating. They will actually kill you. You're a kid, a boy. Go get someone and come back with, what's your name? She blinked. The question seemed to stop her mid-thought. Emily, she said. Emily Cole. Okay, Emily, and I'm going to go get my tools from my truck. I'm going to come back, and we are going to get you out of here. You understand me? She shook her head. You don't know what you're getting into. Maybe not. But I know what I'm not doing. I'm not leaving you chained to a tree. He didn't wait for her to answer. He turned and ran. Logan had kept a heavy-duty bolt cutter in the truck bed since the spring when a calf had gotten its hoof caught in wire fencing at a neighbor's property. He grabbed that. He grabbed a water bottle and the small first aid kit he kept behind the seat. He grabbed his phone, checked the signal 2 bars, barely, and ran back into the trees. Emily heard him coming. When he burst back through the birch stand, she made a sound in her throat that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite relief. It was something between the two. Still here, he said. He's dropping to a knee beside her. They could be back in an hour, she said. Or less. I don't know how long I've been here. I lost track of time. Then we work fast. Hold still. He examined the chain. It was wrapped twice around the tree trunk. Looped through itself, and the padlock ran through the chain links on both passes. Heavy gauge, maybe 3/8 inch. The bolt cutters might do it, but it wouldn't be clean. He worked his way along the chain toward her wrists. Looking for the weakest point. Tell me what happened, he said. Not because he was trying to distract her, but because he needed to know how much time he might have. Emily hesitated. It's complicated, she said. We have a few minutes. Simplify it. Another silence, then I was taken. Abducted. 2 nights ago, I think. From a parking lot in Billing. She paused. My husband, his name is Jackson Cole. He's the national president of a motorcycle organization. The Hells Angels. Do you know who that is? Logan kept working the bolt cutters into position. He didn't answer right away. I know the name, he said. Then you understand why I'm telling you to leave. I understand why you think that's the right advice, he said. I don't agree with it. The bolt cutters found their purchase. He leaned into them with everything he had, both hands on the handles. Shoulders driving the blades together. The chain link resisted for 3 full seconds. Then it gave with a crack that sounded like a gunshot in the still forest. Emily gasped. 1 down, Logan said. He repositioned. How long have your arms been behind you like this? Since they brought me here. At least 30 hours, maybe more. He set his jaw. When I get this second link, your shoulders are going to hurt bad when your arms come forward. Don't panic. The pain means circulation coming back. Just breathe through it. You sound like you've done this before. I haven't. But it makes sense. The second link cracked. The chain fell away. Emily's arms came forward slowly, painfully. She made a sound that was all wrong, the sound of someone suffering through something they'd been holding back for a long time. Her shoulders seized. Her hands shook violently as blood rushed back into her fingers. Logan uncapped the water bottle and pressed it into her hands. She couldn't hold it steadily enough to drink alone. He tilted it for her, and she drank in long pulls, some of it running down her chin. Okay, he said quietly. We're going to get you to my truck. Can you walk? I don't know my feet. He looked. Soles were cut from whatever surface she'd been moved across. Not deep wounds, but enough. I'll help you. He stood up. Got an arm around her shoulders, brought her to her feet. She wobbled badly. He steadied her. How far is your truck? She asked. 1/4 mile, maybe a little more. She exhaled. Okay. We go. They moved through the trees together slowly, unevenly, Emily bearing weight on Logan's arm with every step. He kept listening to the forest around them, kept one eye behind them as much as he could without breaking their stride. His phone was in his pocket. He was trying to calculate whether they'd have signal back at the truck before whatever vehicle brought her here might come back up that road. He was 20 years old, and he was thinking about all of this simultaneously, which was its own kind of extraordinary. They reached the truck. Logan helped Emily into the passenger seat, closed the door. Ran to the driver's side, got in, and started the engine. He checked the signal on his phone. Still barely 2 bars. He tried 911. It connected. 911. What is your emergency? I need police and an ambulance. I found an injured woman chained to a tree up on the old Kellerman logging road north of Crestwood. She's been held there for approximately 30 hours. She needs medical attention. We're heading toward the main road now. He drove as he talked. One hand on the wheel, the truck jolting through the ruts. Sir, can you stay on the line? Yes, we're mobile. She's conscious and talking. Her name is Emily Cole. He heard the dispatcher's pause. Small, almost imperceptible. But there, did you say Emily Cole? That's correct. Another pause. Longer, sir. We are sending multiple units. Do not leave the area. Do you understand? Multiple units are being dispatched. Logan glanced at Emily. She was watching him. They know your name, he said. Of course they do, Emily said quietly. Jackson filed a missing persons report 36 hours ago. He's been looking for me. He's had his people looking for me. And when the police told him they couldn't find me, she stopped. Looked out the windshield at the road ahead. He's going to come himself. And he's not going to come alone. Logan processed that. He kept driving. Emily asked him. Not mockingly. Genuinely, he thought about it for a moment. A little, he admitted. But not about that. What are you scared about then? That we ran into trouble back there and you'd have been hurt worse. That was the scary part. The rest of it is just, he shrugged one shoulder. It's just people. Emily looked at him for a long time. You're not what I expected, she said finally. What did you expect? She almost smiled. Almost, not this. The first police unit reached them on the main road while they were still half a mile from the highway intersection. Then 2 more came. Then a county sheriff's vehicle. Then an ambulance that had clearly been waiting. Rather than coming from far away, someone had pre-positioned it before Logan even got the truck to the road, which told him the dispatch had made immediate calls the moment he said the name Emily Cole. The paramedics took Emily from the truck with professional efficiency. Logan stood beside his open driver's door and watched them work. A deputy came to him young, maybe 25, with a look on his face that was trying to be neutral but wasn't quite managing it. You the one who called it in? Logan Carter. You find her alone? Nobody with you, nobody. I heard the dog barking, and then I heard her. I went in to see. The deputy wrote this down. He looked at Logan's hands, still marked with grease from the truck work. Now with a red crease across both palms from the bolt cutter handles. He looked at the bolt cutters in the truck bed. You cut her free? The chain was 3/8 inch. He's padlocked. Took me 2 tries. The deputy stared at him for a moment. Son, do you understand who her husband is? She told me. And you stayed anyway. She was chained to a tree. The deputy opened his mouth. Then seemed to decide that no follow-up question was going to produce a better answer than that one. He just wrote something down and nodded slowly. An hour later, Emily was in the ambulance, stable, being tended to. Logan had given his full statement. He was sitting on the tailgate of his truck, drinking the last half of a water bottle that one of the paramedics had handed him. When the ambulance doors opened and Emily leaned out, one of the paramedics trying to gently stop her. Logan, she called. He walked over. She reached down and took hold of his hand with both of hers. Her grip was still weak. Her wrists were wrapped in white bandaging now. I need you to hear something, she said. My husband is going to come here. And when he does, do not be afraid of him. He is going to be emotional. He is going to be stopped. Just look him in the eye. Tell him what you told me. Exactly the way you said it. What did I tell you? That she was chained to a tree. She held his gaze. That's all it was. That's what you say. Logan nodded. I'll be okay, he said. I know you will, Emily said. That's not what I'm worried about. The ambulance doors closed. Logan drove back to the shop. He doesn't fully remember making the decision to do that, to just go back to work. But that's what he did. He finished diagnosing the noise in Dave Purcell's F-250. He wrote up the work order. He called Dave to tell him it was the front hub bearing and how much it would run. Dave said, "That's fine, Logan. Hey, is everything all right?" Heard there were a lot of emergency vehicles up on the Kellerman Road. Found someone who needed help, Logan said. Everything's okay now. Good man, Dave said simply. And hung up. Logan stood in the quiet of the shop. The afternoon light was starting its slow drop toward evening. He could hear the wind in the pine trees at the edge of the lot. He could hear, somewhere in the distance, the unmistakable low thunder of motorcycle engines. Not one or two, something larger. Something that sounded like it was growing. He stood at the bay door and looked out. 3 motorcycles came off the highway onto the main road into Crestwood. Then 5 more behind them. Then a group of 8 or 9 riding close together. A tight formation that meant they knew each other and rode together often. They weren't moving fast. They were moving deliberately. Logan's phone rang. He looked at the screen. A number he didn't recognize. Montana area code. He answered, Logan Carter. The voice on the other end was deep, controlled, and carried the particular kind of weight that belongs to men who are used to rooms going quiet when they speak. Mr. Carter. My name is Jackson Cole. I understand you found my wife this afternoon. Logan exhaled slowly. That's right, she's asking for me. I'm on my way to the hospital. But I wanted to call you first. Okay. I want to ask you one question. And I want an honest answer. All right. Why didn't you leave? When she told you who I was, when she told you what you were risking, why did you stay? The shop was quiet. The distant sound of engines had grown slightly louder. Logan thought about what Emily had told him to say. He thought about whether there was a better answer. He couldn't find one. She was chained to a tree, he said. That was all I saw. Everything else came after that. Silence on the line. Long silence, the kind that fills up with things that aren't being said. I'll be in Crestwood in the morning, Jackson Cole said finally. I'd like to meet you. I'll be here. The line went quiet. Logan set the phone down on his workbench. He looked at his hands. Grease and bolt cutter calluses and the faint tremor of someone who has spent 6 hours running on adrenaline that is now running out. He flexed his fingers, one at a time, and let out a long, slow breath. He turned off the bay lights. He locked up the shop. He drove home, and for the first time since that morning, he let himself feel exactly how frightened he had been. Crestwood heard the story, the way small towns always do, the way a stone thrown into still water sends ripples to every shore. By evening, the deputy's account had reached the diner on Main. By dinner, Logan's name was on every table. By people were calling his cell phone neighbors, old friends of his father's. People he'd fixed trucks for, and people he barely knew. He didn't answer most of them. One call he answered was from his mother, who lived across town and had not heard until a friend texted her. She was quiet for a long moment after he told her the short version. You could have been hurt, she said. I wasn't. Logan, Mom. She was chained to a tree. Another silence.
Your father would have done the same thing,
she said quietly. I know, he said. That's what I was thinking about. He didn't sleep much that night. Not because he was afraid, because the day had left something in him that hadn't fully settled yet, a vibration. Deep in the chest, like the aftermath of something very loud in a very small space. He lay in the dark and listened to the night outside. A distant train, crickets. Once, around midnight, the low rumble of motorcycle engines coming down the highway. He counted them. There were more than he could keep track of. In the morning, he made coffee. Opened the shop and was under the front end of Purcell's truck with a creeper and a socket set when he heard the sound. Not just a few bikes this time. He rolled out from under the truck. Stood up, wiped his hands. The sound was coming from the road. From the highway. A low, sustained vibration that he felt before he heard it clearly, the kind of sound that gets into your bones before it reaches your ears. He walked to the bay door and looked out. The first riders came around the bend at the edge of town. Ease. Then more, then more. A line of motorcycles that seemed to have no end, dozens becoming 50. Ease. 50 becoming 100. The formation stretching back around the curve and out of sight. Ease. Chrome and leather and rumbling machines, riders sitting tall. Ease. Riding slow, moving into Crestwood with a deliberateness that was nothing like aggression and everything like purpose. Ease. Logan stood at the bay door of his shop. He didn't move. Ease. He didn't reach for his phone or call for help or retreat to the back. Ease. He stood there in his coveralls with grease on his hands, and he watched them come. Ease. His phone rang. He answered. Mr. Carter. Jackson Cole's voice. Ease. Closer now, clearer. Come outside and walk to the end of your lot. Ease. I'll find you. Logan walked to the end of the gravel lot and stood there. Ease. A single motorcycle broke from the formation and turned onto the gravel. Ease. The man who rode it was large, not threatening large. Ease. Just the kind of large that comes from a lifetime of physical work. Ease. He wore no helmet. Dark hair going silver at the temples. Ease. Eyes that were red at the rims from a night Logan could only imagine. Ease. He stopped the bike 6 feet away. Killed the engine. Ease. Got off without hurry. He walked toward Logan. Logan held his ground. Ease. Jackson Cole stopped in front of him. He was at least 4 inches taller and had 30 years on him. Ease. He looked at the young mechanic for a long, unreadable moment. Ease. Then he said, "She told me what you said to her, that it was all you needed to know that she was chained to a tree." "That's right," Logan said. Ease. Jackson Cole put his hand out. Logan took it. The handshake was long and firm and said everything that neither of them put into words. Ease. Behind Jackson, the riders had stopped. Engines were shutting off in sequence. Ease. A rolling quiet spreading back through the formation. Ease. Hundreds of men and women sitting on their bikes, watching the end of a gravel lot in Crestwood, Ease, Montana. Watching a 20-year-old mechanic stand his ground and not flinch. Ease. Jackson Cole didn't let go of his hand right away. Ease. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, voice low. Ease. "And you can say no. You can absolutely say no." "All right. Emily wants to thank you." Ease. "In person. With our people around. She wants you to know that what you did, she doesn't have words for what you did." Ease. "And neither do I." His jaw moved. "But I'm going to try." Logan looked at the man in front of him. Ease. He looked at the 1,000-pound weight of everything the man had been carrying for the past 2 days, the fear. Ease. The fury, the sleeplessness, the desperate, helpless rage of a man who could move mountains but could not find his wife. Ease. "I'll be there," Logan said. Jackson Cole finally released his hand. Ease. He nodded once, slowly, like a man setting something down that had been very heavy. Ease. "Good," he said, "good." He turned back toward his bike. Ease. Then he stopped. Without turning around, he said, "Your father would have done the same thing." Ease. "I know the name Carter in this state. I know what your family is." Ease. "And I'm glad it was you who found her." Logan stood still for a moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. Jackson Cole started his bike. Ease. The engine turned over with a sound like a decision being made. Ease. And behind him, ease. One by one, ease. Engines woke up across the lot and the road, and as far back as the eye could follow, a wave of sound that rolled through Crestwood, ease. Montana, and carried with it something that wasn't anger. Ease wasn't celebration, wasn't any one thing. It was the sound of loyalty. He's breathing. The morning after Jackson Cole rode into Crestwood, Ease. Logan opened his shop at the usual time, 6:30. Ease. Coffee already cold. Bay doors rolled up. The ordinary machinery of a life that had stopped being ordinary 48 hours ago. Ease. He finished the hub bearing on Purcell's truck before 8. Ease. He called Dave, who came and picked it up and shook Logan's hand twice and didn't say much because Dave Purcell was the kind of man who showed gratitude through action rather than language. Ease. He left a tip in cash on the workbench, twice what Logan would have charged for labor, and drove away without making a thing of it. Ease. 2 other customers came in that morning who hadn't called ahead. Ease. They didn't have broken vehicles. They came to shake Logan's hand. Ease. One of them was 70 years old, a retired rancher named Gerald who'd known Logan's father since they were boys. Ease. Gerald stood in the bay door with his hat in both hands and said, Ease. Your dad would have done exactly what you did. You know that. Ease. Right? I've heard that a few times now, Logan said. Ease. Good, Gerald said. Keep hearing it. Let it in. He put his hat back on and left. Ease. The third time, someone said a version of that sentence that morning. Ease. Logan had to walk to the back of the shop and stand over the utility sink for a minute. Ease. Not crying, just holding something. The way you hold a tool when the job is done and you haven't put it down yet. Ease. By mid-morning, his phone had received 63 text messages. Ease. He'd read maybe half of them. Most were from people he knew. Ease. A few were from numbers he didn't recognize at all, people somehow connected to him through the chain of someone who knew someone who knew someone. Ease. The story was moving. He could feel it moving the way you feel a current underwater, not visible. Ease. Not dramatic, just a pull that doesn't stop. The one message he read 3 times was from Emily. Ease. She had texted from what he assumed was a hospital phone or someone else's cell. Ease. The message was short. It said, "Jackson is going to ask you something today." Ease. Whatever he asks, I want you to know the answer doesn't change anything about what you already did. Ease. You already did the thing that mattered. Everything from here is just everything from here. Ease. He read that last line twice more. Everything from here is just everything from here. Ease. He didn't know exactly what she meant. He thought he understood it enough. Ease. Jackson Cole arrived at the shop at 11 in the morning. Ease. And this time he came with 2 men not as bodyguards. Ease. Logan sensed, but more the way a man of serious business arrives with people he trusts. Ease. The 2 men were older than Jackson, heavier, quieter. Ease. They stayed near the bay door while Jackson walked in alone and shook Logan's hand again. Ease. How are you doing? Jackson asked. The question was direct and unhurried. Ease. The way a man asks when he actually wants the answer. He's working, Logan said. It helps. Jackson nodded. Ease always does. He looked around the shop, not evaluating it. Ease. Just the way a man looks at a space to understand who lives in it. It's your father's place. Was. I know. I heard about it. Ease. I'm sorry. Logan nodded. He would have liked to have met you. Ease. He respected people who built things from the ground up. Jackson looked at him. Ease. Something shifted behind his eyes. That's a generous way to characterize what I've built. It's an accurate one, Logan said. Ease. From where I stand, a short silence, not uncomfortable. Ease. The kind that comes between 2 people who are taking the measure of each other without pretending they aren't. Ease. Emily is being discharged this afternoon, Jackson said. Ease. She wants to see you before she leaves Montana. She's insisting on it. Ease. Actually, which is very Emily. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Ease. She doesn't insist on much. When she does, I've learned to listen. I'll go whenever she's ready, Logan said. Ease. This afternoon, then. Jackson paused. There's something else. Ease. I told you last night I wanted to ask you something, and you could say no. Ease. I meant that. I still mean it. But I want you to hear the whole thing before you answer. Logan set down the wrench he'd been holding. Ease. He gave Jackson his full attention. What happened to Emily was not random, Jackson said. Ease. The controlled weight came back into his voice, that quality Logan had noticed on the phone call. Ease. The sound of a man who has learned to carry enormous things without letting them break his posture. Ease. Someone made a decision. Someone planned it. They took her because she belongs to me. Ease. And they wanted me to know what it felt like to have something taken that I couldn't protect. His jaw tightened slightly. Ease. They underestimated 2 things. First, Emily. She's tougher than anyone who took her understood. Ease. And second, he looked at Logan steadily. They underestimated what it means when a complete stranger, Ease with no stake in any of it, risks himself to undo what they did. I'm not sure I follow, Logan said carefully. Ease. What you did has weight, Jackson said. In my world, Ease. In the world I live and operate in, what you did carries a meaning that goes beyond one person helping another. Ease. You didn't just free my wife. You refused to let them win. Ease. You don't know the people who did this. You had no reason to stand against them. Ease. But you did, and that matters not just to me and Emily, Ease, but to every person who rides with me who's going to hear this story. He paused. Ease. They're already hearing it. Logan said nothing. Ease. He waited. I'm not asking you to become something you're not, Jackson continued. Ease. I'm not asking you to join anything, carry anything. Ease. Represent anything you don't believe in. That's not what this is. Ease. What I'm asking is simpler than that, and it's also bigger than that. He let that sit for a moment. Ease. I'm asking you to stand with us publicly, once. Ease. At a gathering of our people, and let me tell them what you did and who you are. Ease. So they hear it from me, and they see your face, and they understand that the world outside our community isn't all indifference and turning away. Ease. That there are still people in it worth standing beside. The shop was very quiet. Ease. One of the men near the bay door shifted his weight. Ease. A bird moved somewhere in the lot outside. The refrigerator unit in the back of the shop hummed steadily. Ease, Logan said, when? Jackson Cole blinked. He had ease. Logan realized, prepared himself for more resistance. Ease this weekend, Jackson said. Saturday. There's a gathering outside Billings. Ease, our people and allied chapters. Maybe a lot of people, he said it carefully. Ease, watching Logan's face. I won't tell you a number right now. Ease. I don't want the number to be the thing you're thinking about. How many? Logan asked. Ease, more than you're imagining. Logan held his gaze. Ease, how much more? Jackson exhaled thousands. Ease, Logan. Logan didn't visibly react. He picked up the wrench again. Ease, turned it over once in his hands, set it back down. Ease, thousands of people, he said. Not a question. Just placing the number in the air between them. Ease, yes, and you want me to stand in front of him? Yes. Logan was quiet for 10 full seconds. Ease. Jackson didn't rush him. Can I ask you something? Logan said. Ease. Ask whatever you want. What happens to the people who took Emily? The room changed temperature. Ease. Jackson's expression didn't shift the way Logan expected. Ease. It didn't harden. If anything, it became more still. The stillness of a man who has already moved through the anger into something more deliberate on the other side of it. Ease, that's being handled, Jackson said. By who? By the right people, he paused. Ease. By people who've been working on it since before Emily was even found. Ease. We had eyes moving before your call went out. We had people in Billings working backward from the parking lot. Another pause. Ease. The people responsible are going to face legal accountability. Ease. I'm going to make sure of that. Federal charges, if I can push them there. Ease. Because that's the thing that sticks. That's the thing that matters past one generation. Logan absorbed this. Ease. You're not going to know, Jackson said. And for the first time, something like weariness crossed his face. Ease. No. Because Emily would never forgive me, and because what they wanted was for me to act out of rage. Ease. And I've spent 30 years learning that the men who act purely from rage lose. Ease. Every time. He looked at Logan directly. The men who win are the men who make the right move at the right moment. Ease, you understand that? I think so, Logan said. You already know it. Ease. You demonstrated it in those woods. You acted correctly under pressure, without training and without anyone watching. Ease. That's not nothing, Logan. That's rare. Logan looked at his hands. Ease. The grease lines were deep in the creases of his palms. Ease. The way they always were, the way his father's had been. Ease. All right. All right, what? Jackson asked carefully. All right to Saturday, to standing in front of your people. Ease, to whatever you need me to say or be there. Jackson was quiet for a moment. Ease, then I just need you to be you. That's the whole ask. I can manage that, Logan said. Ease. The hospital discharge happened at 3 in the afternoon. Ease. Logan drove over in his truck, still in his coveralls because he hadn't had time to change, and Emily had sent a second text that said, don't get dressed up. Ease. I'll know you're nervous, and it will make me nervous. Ease. Which he understood completely. The hospital corridor had a stillness to it that hospital corridors always carry. Ease. A particular quality of quiet that comes from everyone inside them carrying something heavy. Ease. Logan followed the room number Jackson had texted him. Ease. Turned a corner and nearly walked into a man built like a reinforced wall who turned out to be outside Emily's room specifically to ensure nobody approached without authorization. The man looked Logan over once, then twice. Carter, he said. Ease. Yeah. The man stepped aside immediately. She's been asking about you since 9 this morning. Logan went in. Ease. Emily Cole was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed. Ease. Dressed in clothes someone had brought her not hospital clothes, with her wrists still wrapped, and the bruising on her face now in full color. Ease. The deep plum and ochre of a wound that was healing but hadn't hidden yet. Ease. She looked smaller than she had in the forest. The forest had given her a quality of endurance that this room, Ease, with its bright lights and clean surfaces, hadn't quite replaced. Ease. But when she saw Logan, something happened to her expression that had nothing to do with smallness. Ease. There he is, she said quietly. Logan crossed the room and stood near the bed. Ease. He didn't quite know what to do with his hands, so he put them in his pockets. Ease. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I was chained to a tree for 30 hours, she said. Ease, and then she laughed. A real laugh, brief and sharp. Surprised out of her, sorry. Bad habit. I make jokes when things are hard. Nothing wrong with that, Logan said. Ease. My husband does it too. It drives people crazy because they can never tell when he's serious. She studied Logan. He told me you said yes to Saturday. I did. You didn't hesitate? A little, he admitted. But not enough to say no. Emily was quiet for a moment. Ease. She looked at the window, then back at him. I need to tell you something, she said. Ease. About why they took me, because I don't think Jackson told you the whole thing. Ease. And I think you should know before Saturday. Before you walk into that room with thousands of people and don't fully understand what you're walking into. Logan pulled a chair from against the wall and sat down. Ease, tell me. There's a man named Harlan Briggs, Emily said. Ease. The name came out flat and careful, stripped of emotion. Ease the way you say a name you've practiced saying without expression. Ease. He runs a distribution operation across 4 states illegal. Ease. Obviously. For years, he's been trying to move through territories where our chapters operate. Ease. Not because he needs the territory, because he wants to send a message about who controls what. She paused. Ease. Jackson has worked with law enforcement on and off for years to disrupt what Briggs does. Ease. Nothing overt, nothing that crosses lines but information. Ease. Logistic disruption, making sure certain routes get complicated. She looked at Logan directly. Ease, Briggs found out. And instead of coming at Jackson, he decided to come at me. The room felt like it had gotten quieter. He wanted Jackson to feel it, Logan said. He wanted Jackson to react, exactly. He wanted a public explosion. He wanted Jackson to do something uncontrolled and visible that could be used against him legally. Reputationally, any way that would let Briggs claim the moral high ground with the people he answers to. Because in that world, the man who loses control loses everything. She folded her hands carefully in her lap. If Jackson had come apart, if he'd responded with violence or made threats he couldn't take back, Briggs would have had exactly what he needed. But he didn't, Logan said. No. Because when Jackson got the call about you, something happened in him that I've only seen a few times in 30 years of knowing him. Emily's voice shifted, not louder, but denser somehow, more weighted. He went quiet. Not the quiet of shock. The quiet of a man who has just been given something unexpected. She met Logan's eyes. He called me from outside your shop that first night after you'd spoken on the phone. He said. And I'm telling you exactly what he said. He said, Emily, a 20-year-old kid just changed the whole story. Logan said nothing. You didn't just save me, Emily continued. You reset the entire thing. Briggs wanted chaos. What he got was you. A young man with a bolt cutter and no agenda and no fear of the name. And now instead of Jackson looking like a man who lost control, Jackson looks like the man whose cause was worth a stranger's risk. She paused. That's not a small thing. In the world we live in, that's a very large thing. Logan sat with this for a moment. He felt the weight of it settling into him, not crushing. But real, the way a heavy tool settles into your palm and you feel its full mass before you start to work. I didn't do it for any of that. He said, I know. And Emily said immediately. And that's exactly why it works. He stayed another hour. They talked not about Briggs, not about Saturday. Not about any of the larger machinery turning around them, but about smaller things. Emily asked about his father's shop, and Logan told her how he'd watched his dad rebuild an engine from bare block when Logan was 7 years old and decided that same week that's what he wanted to do with his hands. Emily told him about growing up in Idaho, the youngest of 5. The only one who hadn't gone to college because she'd met Jackson at 19 and understood in approximately the first 30 minutes of knowing him that her life was going to be anything but ordinary. Were you scared? Logan asked. Back then, when you knew where things were going. Emily thought about it genuinely. The way she thought about all his questions, not with a prepared answer, but with real consideration. No, she said, which probably should have scared me more than anything else. She smiled slowly. But when you know, you know. And when you don't know, ease. All the deliberation in the world doesn't get you there. My father said something like that about my mother, Logan said. He's smart man. Smartest I ever knew, he paused. Until recently. He was the only person I ever compared myself to. Emily looked at him carefully. He's, and now, Logan thought about Jackson Cole standing in his shop. He's turning a wrench over in his mind before he even knew how to put the thing into words. He thought about the way Jackson said the men who win are the men who make the right move at the right moment with 30 years of evidence behind each syllable. I'm learning there are more kinds of smart than I thought, Logan said. Emily nodded slowly, like a woman filing something away. Saturday is going to be important, she said. Not just for you. Not just for us. It's going to matter to people you'll never meet. People who need to see that what you did is possible. That it can still happen. That a person can still just do the right thing. Without calculation, without benefit. Her expression was serious now. All the warmth still there, but something firmer under it. Promise me you'll remember that when you're up there and it feels too big. What do I remember exactly? Logan asked. That you already did the hard part, she said. Everything after that is just telling the truth. He drove back to Crestwood in the early evening. The light had gone orange and long, the kind of late afternoon that makes the mountains look carved from something precious. His phone was ringing again before he made it halfway home, not friends this time. Not neighbors. A number with a Billings area code he didn't recognize. He let it ring. It called again. He pulled over and answered it. Logan Carter? A man's voice. Young, professional, slightly too smooth. Who's calling? My name is Derek Soames. I'm a journalist with the Montana Tribune. Mr. Carter, I'd love to talk to you about. No, thank you, Logan said. And ended the call. He pulled back onto the road. The phone rang twice more from the same number. Then a different number, a Denver area code this time. He turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove. The story was moving faster now. He could feel it in the frequency of the calls. In the way the local social media pages he occasionally checked had his name in them like a stone someone had dropped into still water. He'd expected maybe a day's worth of local attention. He was beginning to understand it was not going to stop at local. When he got home, he found a truck parked outside his house that didn't belong there, a newer pickup. Out-of-state plates, 2 men sitting in it who got out when he pulled in. Not threatening. Wrong posture for that, but present in a way that required acknowledgement. Logan got out of his truck. He waited. The older of the 2 men came forward. He was maybe 50, silver-haired, wearing a jacket with a chapter patch Logan recognized from Jackson's network. Mr. Carter, the man said. Jackson asked us to park out here tonight. Just in case. Logan stared at him. In case of what? The man's expression was careful. Harlan Briggs knows your name now, he said. He knows what you did. And he knows what's being planned for Saturday. Logan absorbed this slowly. And you think we don't know what he'd do, the man said directly. Jackson doesn't want to find out. So we're here. We'll be here through Saturday. You won't see us unless you need to. I don't need. Logan. The man said his name simply. Without pressure, but with the weight of someone who has seen the consequences of underestimating the wrong people. Let us do this. It matters to Jackson. It matters to Emily. And honestly, he paused. You're worth protecting. Don't make it an argument. Logan looked at the 2 men. He thought about Harlan Briggs, a name he'd heard for the first time 3 hours ago, and was now apparently relevant to whether he slept safely in his own house. He thought about the way Emily had said you already did the hard part, and wondered if she'd said it for reasons beyond the simple wisdom of the advice. All right, Logan said. Thank you, the man said. Logan went inside. He stood in his kitchen for a moment in the dark before he turned the light on. His father's coffee mug was still on the shelf above the stove, the old one, with the chipped handle. The one Logan kept there, because throwing it away felt like a conversation he wasn't ready to finish. He looked at it. Getting complicated, Dad, he said quietly. The kitchen gave him no answer. But the mug was there, and the light was warm, and outside his house, 2 men he hadn't known 24 hours ago were sitting in a truck to make sure nothing happened to him. Ease. He made dinner. He ate at the table. He thought about Saturday and what standing in front of thousands of people was going to feel like, and whether he had anything inside him that was worth what all these people seemed to believe it was worth. Ease. He didn't reach a conclusion that night, but in the morning, ease. He woke up before the alarm, dressed and drove to the shop. Ease. He opened the bay doors. He started the coffee. He looked at the workbench where his father had stood for 20 years and where he had stood for 2. Ease. And he thought, you do the next thing. You do the work in front of you. Ease. Everything else figures itself out or it doesn't, but the work in front of you, that's always yours. Ease. He picked up a wrench. He got to work. And outside, ease. At the edge of the gravel lot, the 2 men in the pickup truck sat quietly in the early morning light. Ease. Doing theirs. Thursday came the way the day before something significant always does, too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Ease. Logan worked through it with his head down, the way he worked through everything. Ease. An oil change. A cracked serpentine belt. A set of brake pads on a Silverado belonging to a woman named Patricia who kept apologizing for bothering him because she'd heard he'd had a big week and she didn't want to impose. Ease. Logan told her brake pads were never an imposition. He changed them in 40 minutes and charged her his standard rate. Ease. She cried a little when she paid him, which startled him badly enough that he looked behind himself to see if something had happened. Ease. I'm sorry, Patricia said, pressing her hand briefly to her own chest. Ease. I knew your father. He was a very good man. Ease. And watching you be the same kind of man as I'm sorry. Ease. Ignore me. She waved her hand at herself like she was shooing away a fly. Ease. I'm 68 years old and I cry at commercials. Ease. Don't take it personally. Logan put her change in her hand and said, Ease. He would have fixed the brakes for free, just for the company. Ease. You got off lucky. She laughed at that, really laughed. Ease. The kind that clears something out. She drove away. Ease. Logan stood in the bay door long enough to feel the morning air on his face. Ease. And then he went back to work. The 2 men Jackson had sent were still there, rotating shifts. Ease, he'd realized. Different faces sometimes. Same truck. Ease. Same quiet presence at the edge of the lot. He'd stopped noticing them the way you stop noticing a fence that's always been there. Ease. The calls from journalists had continued, which he'd continued not answering. Ease. His neighbor Mike had texted him a screenshot of a post about Logan from a news aggregator page with 40,000 followers. Ease. Which Logan looked at once and then put his phone away. Ease. That evening, Jackson called. How are you holding up? Jackson asked. Fine, Logan said, working. Good. I want to talk to you about tomorrow. Ease. About what Saturday actually looks like. So you're not walking into it cold. Logan settled onto the tailgate of his truck. Ease. The sun was dropping. The men in the pickup at the edge of the lot were 2 shadows against the orange light. Ease. All right, he said. Tell me, we're gathering outside Billings at a property our chapter uses for events. Ease. It's large enough space for the people who are coming. Ease. And I want to be straight with you about that number now because you should hear it from me before you see it. A pause. Ease. We have confirmed riders from 31 chapters across the country. Ease. Allied organizations who've heard what happened are sending representatives. Ease. Family members, supporters. People who aren't in any organization but who heard the story and asked if they could come. Another pause. Ease. Longer Logan, we're looking at somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people on that property Saturday morning. Logan was quiet. Ease. You still there? Jackson asked. I'm here. Say what's in your head. I'm thinking about the largest crowd I've ever spoken in front of, Logan said. Ease. Which was my father's memorial service. 87 people. Ease. I nearly fell over. Jackson made a sound that was almost a laugh. Ease. Almost. You won't be making a speech. I'll do the talking. Ease. I'm going to tell them your story. I'm going to tell them what you did. Ease. And what it means. And why I called every one of these chapters and why they answered. Ease. And then I'm going to bring you out, and you're going to stand there. Ease. And that's enough. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing, Logan repeated slowly. Ease. Yes. Standing there. In front of approximately 4,000 people who are going to react in a way that will be loud, Jackson confirmed. Ease. But they won't touch you without your permission. Ease. They won't surround you. Nobody is going to overwhelm you. Ease. My people will make sure of that. Logan thought about Emily's voice, saying, "You already did the hard part." Ease. He thought about his father's coffee mug on the kitchen shelf. Ease. He thought about the bolt cutter handles cutting into his palms in the forest. Ease. "What time?" he said. "Be at the property by 9. Ease. "I'll have someone meet you at the gate." "I'll be there." Logan. Jackson's voice shifted, the controlled weight dropping slightly. Ease. Something more human coming through the gap. "I want you to understand what this gathering is. Ease. It's not a celebration of what was done to Emily. It's not a war rally. Ease. The people coming are coming because the story of what you did reminded them of something they were afraid they'd forgotten. Ease. That goodness is still operational, still out there in the world doing things. Ease. You understand what I mean?" "I think so," Logan said. Ease. "The enemy in this story isn't Harlan Briggs," Jackson said. Ease. "The enemy in this story is the idea that nobody would help. Ease. That a stranger would see someone in trouble and calculate and walk away. Ease. Briggs is going to face his own consequences. But the thing we're fighting Saturday, the thing 3,000 people are riding to fight, is that idea. Ease. The idea that the world has gotten so cold that a 20-year-old kid with bolt cutters couldn't possibly still exist." He paused. Ease. "You proved it wrong. And people need to see that it's true." Logan sat with that for a moment. Ease. A long moment. "I'm just a mechanic," he said, not with self-pity. "It's just precision." "I know," Jackson said. "That's the entire point. Friday disappeared faster than Thursday had." Ease. Logan didn't sleep much Friday night, which he'd anticipated. Ease. And so he didn't fight it. He lay in the dark with his hands behind his head and let his mind move through whatever it needed to move through. Ease. He thought about the forest, the specific quality of light between the trees. Ease. The way Emily's voice had carried that mix of warning and exhaustion. Ease. The feel of the bolt cutter handles before the chain link gave. Ease. He thought about standing in front of thousands of people and how that was going to feel, and whether he was going to be able to hold himself steady when the moment came. Ease. He had never wanted to be known. That had never been the organizing principle of his life, the way it seemed to be. For some people, the pull toward recognition is toward being seen and validated and confirmed. He had his father's blood in him. Ease. And his father's blood said, "Ease, do the work. Ease, do it right. Ease, and go home." The reward is in the doing, not in the telling of the doing. Ease. But Emily had said something in that hospital room that kept coming back to him in the dark of Friday night. Ease. She had said people need to see that it's possible. Ease. And Logan understood, lying there in the dark, that this wasn't about him being honored. Ease. It was about him being evidence. Evidence of something people needed to believe in and were struggling to. Ease. He could do that. He could be evidence. He got up at 5. Ease. Made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table as the sky outside turned from black to the particular dark blue that happens before the actual light comes. Ease. And he drank his coffee and let the day arrive. At 8 o'clock, Ease. He got in his truck and drove toward Billings. He smelled the gathering before he saw it. Ease. Not in a bad way, in the way of a very large number of engines recently shut down, and the particular leather and road smell that comes off people who've been riding for hours. Ease. He came around the last bend on the county road, and the property opened up in front of him wide. Ease. Flat. A gathering the scale of which he had genuinely not prepared for, despite the number Jackson had given him. Ease. Motorcycles, as far as he could see. Thousands of them. Ease. Lined up in formations that suggested the riders had done this many times and had developed a precise and almost architectural instinct for where to put things. Ease. People moving between them, talking. Ease. Eating from paper plates at long folding tables set up along one side. Ease. Kids running between adults' legs. The sounds of many voices braided together into a sound that was almost whether it had pressure and direction. Ease. It moved. Logan's hands gripped the wheel. A man flagged him at the gate, one of Jackson's. Ease. Recognizable by the deliberate calm he wore, the way other men wore jackets. Ease. He pointed Logan toward a parking area set aside from the main crowd. Ease. Walked him in on foot and brought him to a smaller tent near the main platform where Jackson was waiting. Ease. Jackson Cole in a crowd was different from Jackson Cole in a mechanic's bay. Ease. He was still the same man, same controlled weight. Ease. Same quality of stillness, but here, he was like a fixed point around which everything else moved. Ease. People came to him, spoke briefly. departed. He acknowledged each one without losing track of the larger picture. Ease. When Logan came through the tent opening, Jackson turned immediately. Ease. Like he'd known the exact moment. He crossed the tent in 3 strides and extended his hand. Ease. Logan shook it. You came, Jackson said. I said I would. I know. Ease. I still wanted to see it. He put a hand briefly on Logan's shoulder. Ease. Come here. Someone needs to meet you first. He brought Logan to the far side of the tent where Emily was sitting with 2 women flanking her friends. Ease. Logan guessed, or family. Emily was not in hospital clothes now. Ease. She was dressed in a way that said she had made a deliberate effort. Ease that she had decided she was not going to let what had happened to her define how she arrived here today. Ease. Her wrists were still wrapped, and the bruising was still visible on her face. Ease. But she sat straight, and when she saw Logan, her expression went to something completely unguarded. Ease. She stood up. She walked to him. You wore your good coveralls, she said. Ease. He looked down at himself. He had worn jeans and a clean flannel shirt, Ease, which was approximately as dressed up as he got. I left the grease-covered ones at home. I appreciate the sacrifice. She took both of his hands carefully. Ease. The way her wrists required, and held them. How do you feel? Like someone told me I have to address a small city, Logan said. Ease. You don't have to address anybody. You just have to stand there. Jackson said the same thing. Jackson is right about some things. She released his hands but held his gaze. Ease. You are going to be fine. I need you to hear me say that so you actually believe it before you walk out there. Ease. You are going to be fine because you've already done the thing that earned you this moment. Ease. Today, is just the receipt. He almost laughed at that. Ease. A receipt, he said. Okay, she confirmed. Ease. Jackson took the platform at 10 o'clock. Ease. The crowd settled the way large crowds settle when the person they've come to hear begins to speak not all at once. Ease. But in a wave, the outer edges going quiet first and the quiet moving inward until it reached the center. Ease. Logan stood at the back of the platform, slightly behind the line of sight from the crowd, Ease, and watched Jackson step to the front. He had not seen Jackson speak to a crowd before. Ease. He understood, watching it happen, why thousands of people had ridden from across the country at this man's word. Ease. Jackson Cole did not perform. He did not work the crowd. Ease did not build to artificial peaks, did not use the rhetorical tricks Logan had seen politicians use on television. Ease. He simply spoke as if every person in front of him was standing close enough to hear a normal conversation. Ease. And somehow the amplification and the silence that 4,000 people created together made it work. Ease. Most of you know why we're here, Jackson began. Some of you rode 12 hours to be here. Ease. Some of you rode 2 days, and I'm going to tell you whatever it cost you to get here. Ease. It was worth it. Because the story I'm going to tell you is one of those stories that reminds you what you're actually supposed to be. The crowd was fully silent now. Ease. 6 days ago, Jackson said, my wife Emily was taken. Ease. She was taken from a parking lot in Billings by people who believed that the best way to hurt me was to hurt her. Ease. They chained her to a tree in the mountains, and they left her there. Ease. They believed nobody would find her in time, and they believed that if I lost her, I would lose myself. He paused. They were wrong on both counts. The crowd began to stir. Ease. Not noise or vibration. The physical response of thousands of people feeling something simultaneously. Ease. Emily was found by a young man named Logan Carter, Jackson continued. He's 20 years old. He's a mechanic. He runs his father's shop in a small town called Crestwood. He was looking for a neighbor's dog. Jackson let that sit for a moment. He heard a woman's voice in the trees, and he followed it. He found my wife chained and injured and alone, and she told him to run. She told him he didn't understand who her husband was. She told him the people who left her there would come back and kill him. The crowd was absolutely still. He didn't run, Jackson said. He went back to his truck. Got a bolt cutter, came back into those trees, and he cut her free. He stayed with her until help arrived. He called it in. He gave his statement to the police. And then, Jackson's voice did something Logan hadn't heard it do before it slowed down. The way a man's voice slows when he's saying the truest thing he's going to say. And then he went back to his shop and finished the work he'd been doing before he found her. because that's the kind of man he is. Logan, standing behind the platform, felt the crowd react to that. It went through them like a current. He felt it as a physical thing, a change in the quality of the air. This young man had nothing to gain, Jackson said. He had no connection to us. He didn't know Emily. He didn't know me. He had every reason to calculate his risk and walk away, and he didn't calculate anything. He saw a person who needed help, and he helped her. Jackson looked out at the crowd slowly, making the kind of eye contact that only works when you mean every word of what comes next. In my 30 years of leading this organization, I have tried to build something that people can be proud of. I have made mistakes. We have made mistakes. But the thing I have tried to build is a community of people who show up for each other, who do not turn away from someone who needs them, who understand that loyalty is not a word, it's an action you take when taking that action costs you something. He pointed toward where Logan was standing. That young man understood that without anyone teaching it to him. He lived it alone. In the middle of the woods, with no audience and no reward. Logan understood what was about to happen about 2 seconds before it happened. Jackson turned and looked directly at him. Logan, he said, come out here. Logan Carter walked out onto that platform the way he did most things, without theatrical pause. Without adjusting his expression into something he thought people wanted to see, without preparing a version of himself for display. He just walked out, and he stood next to Jackson, Cole, and he looked at the crowd. He had expected to be overwhelmed. He had expected the scale to hit him like something physical and knock him sideways. He was prepared for that. What he was not prepared for was the silence. 4,000 people went completely, absolutely quiet. Not the held breath silence of waiting. The silence of people who are feeling something and have gone still because of it. Logan had never heard that much quiet come from that many people. He stood in it and felt it on his skin. Then someone started it. He never saw who. Never found out a single voice somewhere in that crowd, starting something. And it spread. Not cheering exactly. Not applause exactly. Something older than both of those, a sound that human crowds have made since before there were words for it. The sound of recognition, of saying, we see you. We know what you did. We know what it means. Logan stood in it. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't perform humility. He just stood there with his hands at his sides and his eyes open, and he received it the way Emily had told him to. The way his father's instinct ran through him like a wire. He's telling him, this is not yours to own. Hold it for the moment and let it pass through you. Jackson leaned slightly toward him. Breathe, he said quietly. Logan breathed. The sound continued for longer than he could measure. Then gradually, like the end of a rainstorm, it eased. Jackson spoke again. This is what we came here to say. That what this young man did matters, that it is possible. That you don't have to have a patch on your back or a reason that the world would recognize to stand up for another person. All you need is to be the kind of person who sees someone chained to a tree and cannot walk away. He turned slightly toward Logan. Logan, I'm going to ask you something. In front of all of these people. And you can answer however you want. Logan met his eyes. All right. When Emily told you who I was, when she told you what you were risking, what did you think? The crowd waited. Logan considered giving a shorter answer. He decided against it. I thought that she was still chained to the tree while we were talking, he said. His voice carrying into the microphone Jackson had positioned between them. And I thought that every second I spent thinking about what might happen to me was a second the chains were still on her. So I stopped thinking about what might happen to me. Jackson looked at him for a moment. Then he turned back to the crowd. That, he said simply, is the whole lesson. That is everything I have been trying to teach for 30 years in one sentence from a 20-year-old mechanic. What came from the crowd then was different, louder. Sharper. More full-throated, it went up like something released. Logan stood in it again. He breathed through it. He held himself steady. And then the thing happened that he would carry for the rest of his life. The thing that decades later he would still reach for when he needed to remember that the world was fundamentally worth the trouble of living in. A man near the front of the crowd, older, heavy-set, ease. Wearing a vest marked with a chapter from somewhere, Logan didn't recognize that man reached up and took off his own patch. Ease. A chapter patch, the kind that meant something in that community, Logan didn't fully understand but recognized as significant by the weight with which the man handled it. Ease. He held it up, looked at Logan, and set it on the ground in front of the platform. Ease. A gesture Logan didn't have language for. A gesture that said something in a dialect he was just beginning to learn. Ease. Then another man did it. Then three more. Then a woman on the left side of the crowd took off a pin that had been on her vest for what looked like years. Ease. And set it at her feet. And Logan understood what they were saying. Ease. They were not giving up their membership, their allegiance, ease, their identity. They were setting something down as an offering. Ease. They were saying, this is what we value. You represent this. Ease, we lay it here. Jackson Cole, standing beside him, Ease made a sound that was very low and very quiet. Not word. Ease. Just breath moving through something it didn't quite have passage for. Ease. That doesn't happen, Jackson said very quietly. Just for Logan. Ease, in 30 years. That has never happened. Logan couldn't answer that. Ease. He had no answer for it. He just stood there while the world surprised him in the way it sometimes does completely. Ease. And without warning, and in a way that asks nothing back. Ease. After the gathering formally ended, ease. The crowd didn't leave immediately the way crowds at organized events usually do. Ease. They moved, shifted, reorganized into smaller groups. Ease. And one by one, and then in twos and threes. And then in a flow that became nearly constant, people came to Logan. Ease, not to demand anything, not to overwhelm. Speak. Ease. An older man named Ray who'd ridden from Oregon. My son wouldn't look me in the eye for 10 years because he thought I'd never done anything in my life that was about someone else. Ease. I'm going to call him tonight. I'm going to tell him this story. A woman who'd come from Colorado. Ease. I was going to give up on something this week. I won't now. Ease. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but you should know. A man Logan's own age, he's maybe a year or two older, who said absolutely nothing, just shook Logan's hand with both of his. He's held it for 2 seconds, nodded once, and walked away. That one hit him the hardest, somehow, the silence of it. Jackson stood nearby but gave Logan space. Emily was nearby too. Sitting with the two women, watching, without intruding. But at one point, during a brief gap in the stream of people, she caught Logan's eye across the space between them and gave him a single small nod. The nod said, I know. It's a lot. You're doing it right. He nodded back. The last person to approach him before the crowd had fully dispersed was a man Logan hadn't been introduced to, a man who had the look of someone accustomed to not being the most visible person in a room. Somewhere in his 50s. Quiet suit in the middle of all the leather and denim. The kind of eyes that took things in without being obvious about it. He extended his hand. Logan Carter. Logan shook it. That's me. My name is Ren Marsh, the man said. I'm a federal investigator. I've been working an investigation adjacent to what happened to Emily Cole for about 14 months. He said this with the careful precision of someone who chooses every word to carry exactly its correct weight. I'm not here in an official capacity today. I'm here because Jackson invited me, and because I wanted to put a face to a name I've been hearing a great deal about since Tuesday. He paused. And because there's something I think you should know. Logan went still. What's that? Harlan Briggs made a mistake, Marsh said. When he moved against Emily, he crossed a threshold that he had been careful to stay beneath for 4 years. What he did to her, the federal dimensions of it, have opened a door that my office has been waiting to walk through for a very long time. He looked at Logan steadily. I want you to understand something. The people who chained her to that tree are going to prison. Not on the strength of community outrage. Not on the strength of what Jackson Cole can do through his networks. On the strength of federal evidence that your Tuesday phone call accelerated by approximately 2 years. He paused. When you called 911 and said Emily Cole's name, a chain of events began that I have been trying to start from the inside for 14 months. You started it in about 6 minutes. Logan looked at him. He thought about what Emily had told him in the hospital, that he'd reset the whole story. He hadn't fully understood it then. He understood it now with a clarity that was almost physical. Ease. I didn't know any of that, Logan said. I know you didn't, Marsh said. Ease. That's what made it work. He released Logan's hand. Ease. I wanted you to know. Not for credit, I understand you don't particularly want credit. Ease. But because knowing the full shape of what happened matters. Ease. It changes how you carry it. Logan stood with that for a moment. Ease. The full shape of what happened. He turned the phrase over. Ease. Does Jackson know, he asked. Yes, Marsh said. He's known since Wednesday. Ease. He asked me to let you hear it from me directly in person. Ease. He thought it would land differently that way. A slight pause. Ease. He was right. Marsh gave him a short nod and walked away. Ease. Unhurried, disappearing into the thinning crowd. Logan stood alone for a moment in the middle of what had been 4,000 people and was now becoming open air and scattered voices and the sound of engines beginning to wake. Ease. He looked at the platform where he'd stood. He looked at the ground in front of it. Ease. Where men and women had set down things that mattered to them. Ease. He thought about a bolt cutter in a forest. He thought about 6 minutes. Ease. He thought about his father saying not once but a dozen times, ease, in that quiet way of his that never made a thing of itself. Ease. Logan, sometimes the right thing and the necessary thing are the same thing. Ease. When that happens, you don't deliberate. You just move. Ease. He had just moved. He hadn't known he was moving the tectonic plates of a 14-month federal investigation. Ease. He hadn't known he was resetting the strategic calculations of a man like Harlan Briggs. Ease. He hadn't known that 6 minutes on a 2-bar cell signal on a logging road would travel 3,000 miles in 5 days and bring people from 31 chapters to a field outside Billings. Ease. He'd known a woman was chained to a tree. That was all. Ease. And standing now in the aftermath of everything that had grown from that single fact, ease. Logan Carter felt something settle into him, not pride. Ease. Not quite. Something quieter. The specific piece of a person who has discovered that their instincts, ease, trusted completely and without reservation, lead somewhere worth going. Ease. He stood with it. He let it in. Then he walked to where his truck was parked. Ease. Got behind the wheel and started the engine. He had a serpentine belt to finish in the morning. Ease. And the Carter shop didn't run itself. He drove home from Billings with the windows down and the radio off. Ease. Not because he was upset. Not because he needed silence in the way a person needs it after something bad. Ease. He needed it the way a person needs it after something very large to let the size of it settle without adding more noise on top. Ease. The fields ran past him in the dark. The mountains were outlines against a sky with too many stars to count. Ease. Logan drove and breathed and let the evening work on him. Ease. He was halfway home when his phone rang through the truck's Bluetooth. Ease. He almost didn't answer. Then he saw it was a Crestwood number, his neighbor. Ease. Mike, who had lived 2 houses down since Logan was in grade school, and who had the specific quality of a man who doesn't call unless there's a reason. Ease. Hey, Mike. Logan. Mike's voice was careful in a way that put Logan's spine straight immediately. Ease. You heading back from Billings? About 40 minutes out. Ease. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just there's a lot of people in Crestwood right now. Ease. A lot of people who weren't here this morning. A pause. Ease. About 200 motorcycles came through about an hour ago. Ease. Some are parked on the main drag. Some came down your street. Ease. They're not causing any trouble. They're just here. Ease. And people are out on their porches watching, and nobody's quite sure what's happening. Logan processed this. Ease. Are the guys Jackson sent still at my lot? 3 trucks now. Ease. Not one, Mike said. Seems like the detail got bigger. Logan exhaled. Ease. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Tell people it's fine. Ease. Nobody's in trouble. What do I tell them it is? Logan thought about it for a moment. Ease. Tell them somebody's saying thank you, he said. Tell them it's a thank you that takes up a lot of space. Mike was quiet for a second. Ease. Then he said, with the particular dry warmth of a man who has known you since you were small, Ease. Your dad would have gotten a kick out of this. Logan felt that hit him in the chest the way it always did. Ease. Quick and clean. Yeah, he said. He would have. He drove the rest of the way with the same empty radio and the same open window. Ease. But something had shifted in him slightly. The scale had expanded again. Ease. It kept doing that. Every time he thought he understood the full size of what had happened, Ease, it grew another edge. Crestwood was not just a footnote in this anymore. Crestwood was in it now. His town. The streets where his father had driven for 30 years. The neighbors who had watched Logan grow from a kid who followed his dad around with a half-size wrench into a man who ran the bay alone. His town was in the story. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. He drove, and he let the feeling settle, and he decided that how he felt about it was secondary to what was actually happening, and that what was actually happening was probably going to require him to be present rather than private. He shifted the truck into the right lane and pressed slightly harder on the accelerator. The first thing he saw when he came into Crestwood was the motorcycles. Mike had said 200, and Mike was right. They were lined along both sides of the main street, parked with the particular neat geometry of people who cared about their machines and were deliberate about where they put them. Not aggressive, not territorial, just present, like sentinels that happened to have chrome and leather. People were out. The diner was open late and lit up and had people spilling out onto the sidewalk with coffee cups. Old Gerald, the retired rancher who'd come to shake Logan's hand 2 mornings ago, was sitting on the bench outside the hardware store talking to a man wearing a vest from a chapter in Wyoming. They were laughing about something. 2 of the women from the church 3 blocks over had brought out a coffee urn and a plate of something wrapped in aluminum foil. Because that was what women from that particular church did when a large number of guests arrived unexpectedly. Logan parked in front of his shop, got out. A cheer went up small, spontaneous, starting somewhere down the block and rippling. He raised one hand in acknowledgement, which was all he could manage without feeling ridiculous. And walked to the bay door and stood there in the way that had become, he realized, his default position when he needed to understand something, just standing at the bay door, looking out at whatever the world had sent him today. Jackson Cole materialized from somewhere in the crowd. Logan hadn't expected him, and he showed it. "You followed me home," Logan said. "I followed my people home," Jackson said. "Some of them wanted to see where you lived. Where the shop is." He looked down the main street. "I hope this is all right. You're asking me if 200 people descending on my town is all right." "Yes. It's a little late for that question," Jackson almost smiled. "I know. I'm asking anyway." Logan looked out at the street. Gerald was still laughing with the Wyoming rider. The church ladies were refilling someone's cup. A group of teenagers who should have been home had materialized from somewhere and were examining motorcycles with the transparent reverence of people who know what they're looking at is extraordinary. Crestwood, on a Saturday night, had become something it had never been. And the remarkable thing, the thing Logan noticed and held on to, was that it looked comfortable. It looked like a town that was surprised by itself in the best possible way. "It's all right," Logan said. Jackson stood beside him at the bay door. Not speaking for a moment, comfortable with the silence the way Logan was 2 men who had each, in their own way, learned to let things be what they were without rushing them toward the next thing. "I talked to Marsh after you left," Jackson said finally. "He told me about the investigation," Logan said. "About the 14 months. He told you the short version." "There's more." Jackson turned slightly toward him. "Briggs made his first serious mistake the night he had Emily taken. I don't mean morally, I mean tactically. He used a communications channel that Marsh's team had been monitoring for 4 months. It was stupid and arrogant, which is how smart criminals eventually destroy themselves. They start believing their own judgment is infallible." He paused. "But what that means in practice is that Marsh had the evidence chain complete before Emily was even found. Before your call, he had enough to move. What he didn't have was a reason the U.S. Attorney's Office would prioritize it." He looked at Logan steadily. "Your call gave it to them." Logan frowned. "The U.S. Attorney's Office moved because of my call? They moved because when Emily was found alive, the story became national within 24 hours. And when a case becomes national, it becomes a priority. Because prosecutors are people and people respond to visibility." Jackson's voice was flat, not bitter. "Just accurate. I've watched that dynamic work against my community my whole adult life. For once it worked in our favor." He paused. Because of you. Logan absorbed this. Ease. And Briggs is going to be federally indicted within 30 days, Jackson said. Ease. Marsh told me this afternoon. Kidnapping, interstate trafficking of persons. He's racketeering the works. He paused. He's not walking away from this. He's not from a federal case this clean. The relief Logan felt was different from what he'd expected relief would feel like. It wasn't warm or euphoric. It was more like the feeling when a load-bearing repair turns out solid, a quiet rightness. The mechanical satisfaction of things holding. Emily, he said. Safe. She's going to my sister's place in Colorado for a few weeks. Somewhere quiet, somewhere she can just be tired without people watching. A pause. She wanted me to tell you something before she left. She wanted to make sure you heard it directly. What? That she thinks about the moment she saw you come through those trees about 30 times a day, Jackson said. And every time she thinks about it, she thinks he didn't know if it was safe. He went anyway, and she wants you to know that she understands what that cost you. Even if you don't. He paused. Even if you would never put it in those terms yourself. Logan said nothing for a moment. He looked at the street. A kid maybe 14 was sitting on a Harley's seat at the owner's invitation. His grip on the handlebars, the expression of someone experiencing a very particular kind of joy. Tell her she doesn't owe me anything, Logan said. She knows that. That's the point. Jackson paused. The things we don't owe each other, those are the ones that actually matter. The crowd in Crestwood dispersed gradually across the late evening. The way a tide goes not all at once, but in stages. The level dropping steadily until the street was almost itself again. Some riders had already pushed on before Logan arrived. The rest left by mid. Most of them. Moving in small groups with that rolling thunder that was becoming familiar to Logan's ear. The specific acoustic signature of the world he had stepped sideways into. He slept deeply that night. His body had been running on something artificial for 6 days adrenaline. Obligation, the forward momentum of events that demanded presence, and when the last of it burned through, he went down hard and clean and didn't move until nearly 7. Sunday was quiet. The 2 men from Jackson's detail were gone by morning. A fact Logan noticed and felt, in a small way he hadn't anticipated, as a kind of loss. Not because he'd needed them, nothing had happened. No threat had materialized, but because their presence had been a particular kind of company. The company of people who showed up because someone asked them to, and because they believed the asking was legitimate. He'd grown up around people like that. His father's friends. Men and women who came when you needed them and didn't discuss it afterward. He made breakfast. He called his mother and talked for 40 minutes, which was longer than they usually talked. She asked him careful questions about how he was holding up. Not just the physical and practical, but the rest of it, the interior country of it. The part she'd been watching anxiously through the week's events, the way mothers watch from a distance when they know their presence would be more pressure than comfort. Are you okay, she asked. Not the small talk version. The real one. Logan thought about it. I think so, he said. It's a lot. But it feels like the right kind of a lot. Does that make sense? Your father used to say that about hard weeks, she said quietly. He used to say the weight of the right kind of work doesn't break you the same way. It might make you tired, but it doesn't make you less. Logan pressed his thumb into the edge of his coffee mug. When did he say that? After your grandfather's funeral. After you were born. After the year the shop nearly went under, and he worked 16-hour days for 8 months straight to keep it. She paused. He said it a lot, actually. He just didn't say it for an audience. He mostly said it to me in the kitchen when he thought nobody else was listening. I probably heard it anyway, Logan said. I used to hang around more than either of you knew. She laughed at that, a real laugh. The relaxed kind that meant the anxiety had released a notch. Yes, you did, she said. I knew. I always knew. He hung up feeling more settled than he had all week. Then he drove to the shop, not because he had anything scheduled on a Sunday, but because the shop was where he thought most clearly. And there was something he needed to think clearly about. The call came at 11:17 Sunday morning. Please. Not Jackson, not Marsh, not any number associated with the week that had just happened. Please, a Crestwood number. A local. Logan answered it out of habit. Please. Logan Carter? The voice was male, middle-aged, carrying a specific kind of strain, the voice of a man who has prepared what he's going to say and is saying it exactly as rehearsed, because if he deviates, he'll lose his nerve. He's speaking. My name is Dale Whitmer. I own the garage on Route 9. He's the other side of Crestwood. You probably know the name. Logan knew the name. Dale Whitmer's garage had been there longer than Logan's father's shop. They weren't competitors, exactly, different enough clientele. Different specialties, but they weren't close. They'd nodded at each other at the hardware store over the years. That was the extent of it. I know it, Logan said. I need to talk to you about something, Dale said. The strain in his voice was getting more pronounced. Not less in person, if you're willing. It's important. And it's I need you to hear me out before you say no. Is what I'm asking. Logan set down the socket wrench he'd been turning in his hand. He's come to the shop, he said. I'm here now. 20 minutes later. Dale Whitmer arrived. He was in his 60s, with the build and hands of a man who'd spent 40 years under vehicles. He came in through the bay door and looked around the shop with the specific expression of a fellow mechanic, noting the organization of the tools, the condition of the equipment, the subtle signatures of how a person runs a space before he looked at Logan. Thank you for seeing me, he said. Sit down if you want. Logan gestured to the shop stool near the workbench. Dale sat. He put his hands on his knees and looked at them for a moment. Then looked up. I have to tell you something, and I should have told someone a long time ago, he said. But I was afraid. I'm still afraid, honestly. But I watched what you did this week, and I thought if a 20-year-old kid can walk into that forest with no backup, then I can at least make one phone call. Logan waited. I know who hired the people who took Emily Cole, Dale said. The shop went very still. I know the name, Dale continued. I know because I heard it. About 8 weeks ago, a man came into my shop for a brake job, a man I'd seen maybe twice before. Not a regular, someone passing through. He was on his phone the whole time. Loud talker, the kind of man who doesn't think about who can hear him. Dale's jaw worked. He said a name. He said Briggs, and he said Emily Cole's name. And he said a location in Billings, and he said a date. He looked at Logan directly. It was 3 weeks before she was taken. What he described was a plan. Not all of it, not the details, but enough. He stopped. I should have called someone then. I know I should have. I told myself I'd misheard. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it wasn't my problem. But you didn't call, Logan said. No, Dale's voice went rough. I didn't call. And then she was taken anyway. And you found her. And all week I've been watching you. Watching what you did, and I can't live with myself. His hands pressed harder on his knees. I'm telling you because I don't know who else to tell, and because I think you'll know what to do with it. Logan sat with this for a moment. A long moment. He felt the weight of it, not the same weight as the forest. Not the same weight as the bolt cutter handles cutting into his palms. But a weight with the same essential shape. Something that required a decision. Right now, without time to deliberate. You need to call Ren Marsh, Logan said. Federal investigator. I'm going to give you his number. You call him today. Right now. He's from this shop if you want. And you tell him exactly what you told me. Everything. Word for word. Dale looked at him. Will there be? You didn't do anything illegal. Dale, Logan said. You heard something you should have reported, and you didn't. That's not a crime. What you're doing right now, coming here, agreeing to talk to a federal investigator, that's the right thing. That's the thing that matters. Dale was quiet for a moment. Then I was afraid for my shop. I was afraid for my family. I was afraid of what kind of people these were. I know, Logan said simply. You weren't afraid, Dale said, in the forest. You weren't afraid. I was afraid, Logan said. I just didn't let the fear be the last word. Dale looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through his face, relief maybe, or the particular release of a man who has been carrying something in a locked room inside himself and has finally opened the door. Ease. All right, Dale said. Give me the number. Marsh answered on the second ring. Ease. Logan handed the phone to Dale and walked to the other end of the shop to give him privacy. Ease. He heard Dale's voice steadier now, the rehearsed quality gone. Ease. Replaced by the plainness of a man saying a true thing, and he didn't listen to the words. Ease. He looked at his father's workbench. He looked at the coffee mug on the shelf that he'd never moved. Ease. He thought about how information moves through the world, not in straight lines. Ease. Not through the people who are supposed to carry it. Ease. But sideways and diagonally, through brake jobs and two-bar cell signals and neighbors' missing dogs. Ease, he thought. This is not over. Not for the investigation. Ease, not for Briggs. And he was right. Dale talked to Marsh for 22 minutes. Ease. When he hung up and walked back down the length of the shop, Ease. His face had the exhausted, emptied look of a man who has just put down something he's been carrying incorrectly for months. Ease. He wants me to come in tomorrow, Dale said. Full statement. Ease. Recorded. Yes. No hesitation. Ease. I will. He looked at Logan. He said Marsh said what I heard could matter. Ease. For corroboration. He said there are layers to this case, and what I heard could close one of the layers that's been open. Dale shook his head slowly. Ease. I could have closed it 8 weeks ago. You're closing it now, Logan said. Ease. That's what counts. Dale put out his hand. Logan shook it. Ease. The handshake was firm and brief. The kind between two men who understand each other through the medium of work done with their hands. Ease. Your father would be proud, Dale said. I know that gets old to hear. It doesn't, Logan said. Ease. It doesn't get old. Dale drove away. Logan stood at the bay door again, his position. Ease. His default orientation to the world when the world was asking him to understand something. Ease. He stood there and watched Dale's truck turn out of the lot and disappear down the road. Ease. Then he got his own phone and called Jackson. Jackson answered immediately. Ease. Dale Whitmer called Marsh, Logan said. He's a mechanic on Route 9. Ease. He heard something 8 weeks ago that he should have reported. Ease. He didn't. He came to me today and told me he talked to Marsh. Ease. He's going in for a recorded statement tomorrow. A long pause on the line. Ease. Where did this come from? Jackson said. He watched what happened this week, Logan said. Ease. He said if I could walk into that forest, he could make a phone call. Another pause. Ease. Longer, Logan. Jackson's voice had the quality it had gotten on the gathering platform. Waited. Ease. Deliberate. The voice of a man measuring every word. Ease. Do you understand what you've done? Not the forest. Ease. Not Saturday this. Right now, today. I talked to a man in my shop, Logan said. Ease. You created a condition, Jackson said. You created a condition in which people who were silent before decided that silence was no longer an option. Ease. You didn't ask them to come forward. You didn't pressure anyone. Ease. You just lived something in front of them, visibly. Ease. And it moved them. He paused. Dale Whitmer's statement may be the piece that completes the federal case. Ease. Marsh told me there was a corroboration gap that was going to complicate the trial. Ease. That gap may just have closed. Another pause, because a 60-year-old mechanic saw a 20-year-old mechanic do something he couldn't walk away from. Logan was quiet. Ease. It keeps going. Ease, Jackson said. Ease, and his voice was quieter now. Ease. Not less certain, just aware of something large and moving in a way it was moving at its own pace. Ease. It just keeps going. I know, Logan said. Are you okay? I'm thinking about getting back to work, Logan said. Ease. Jackson exhaled, not exasperated, not amused. Something richer than both. Ease. Of course you are, he said. Of course you are. The week that followed was the first week since the forest that felt recognizably like his life. Ease. The journalists stopped calling by Wednesday, which helped. Ease. The traffic in town normalized. The motorcycles that had lingered at the edges of Crestwood for days gradually moved on. Ease. The riders carrying whatever they'd come to take with them, whatever piece of a story they'd needed to stand near. Ease. The two men from Jackson's detail had not come back after Sunday morning. Ease. Which meant Jackson had decided the threat environment had changed. Ease. Logan trusted that judgment without needing it explained. Ease. He fixed 12 vehicles that week. A rusted undercarriage. Ease. A transmission that had been making a sound like something dying slowly. Ease. A truck belonging to a family passing through who had a cracked radiator hose in the worst possible place and who stood in his lot looking at each other with the particular helplessness of people stranded and out of their element. He fixed them in under 2 hours, refused to charge them more than parts, and sent them on their way. The woman, the mother, traveling with 2 teenagers, and what looked like all their belongings, shook his hand at the door of her vehicle and said, "Are you the man who was in the news? The mechanic from Crestwood?" He said yes. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "We've been driving for 4 days. We didn't have much money for repairs and you just..." She stopped. "Thank you. For this and for the other thing. The thing that was on the news. Good luck on the road," he said. And meant it. He watched her drive away. Then he went back inside. Thursday afternoon, Marsh called him directly. "Whitmer's statement was exactly what we needed," Marsh said. He was not a man who wasted words on preamble, which Logan had come to appreciate. The U.S. attorney moved this morning. The indictment was filed. Briggs is in federal custody. Logan stopped moving. He stood still in the middle of the shop. "It's done," he said. "This phase," Marsh said carefully. "The trial will take time. These things always do. But the indictment is real. The evidence is solid, and Briggs is not getting bail on federal kidnapping with racketeering attached." He sits and waits. A pause. "The people who physically took Emily, 3 individuals, are cooperating with the government in exchange for reduced charges. Their statements will make the case airtight." Another pause. "The corroboration gap that Whitmer closed, you were right that it mattered. It was the last piece. Did Whitmer know that?" Logan asked. When Marsh told him, did he know he was the last piece? Yes. Logan thought about Dale Whitmer. He's 60 years old, 40 years of work done with his hands. 8 weeks of carrying the wrong kind of weight in the wrong kind of way. Good, Logan said. He needed to know. Yes, Marsh agreed. A short pause. "I want to say something to you." Logan, and I want to say it plainly because I think you prefer plain language. I do. In 14 months of working this investigation, I encountered a great deal of courage, Marsh said. Informants who risked a great deal. Investigators who pushed past what was comfortable. People in Jackson Cole's community who helped us in ways that cost them. He paused. None of it had the quality yours had. Because all of those people knew, to varying degrees, what they were getting into. You walked into something you couldn't see the shape of, without any map, and you did the right thing anyway. And then you kept doing the right thing. In my experience, that's not common. I wanted you to know that I've seen it up close, and I am telling you it's not common. Logan was quiet for a moment. I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Emily, he finally said. I'm just a mechanic. I know, Marsh said. And I'm going to tell you the same thing Jackson told you. That's exactly why it worked. Friday evening, as the week finally closed, Logan drove to the cemetery at the edge of town. He did this occasionally. Not on any schedule. Not as ritual exactly. But as the specific kind of conversation a person has when the other half of the conversation is no longer available through ordinary means. He stood at his father's marker, a plain stone with a plain name, the way his father would have wanted it, and he talked. Not about the week in its logistical dimensions, not about Briggs or Marsh or federal indictments. About the feeling of it, about standing in the forest with a bolt cutter. About standing on a platform in front of 4,000 people who had gone completely silent. About Dale Whitmer's hands on his knees trembling slightly. Carrying something he should have put down 8 weeks earlier. About the woman with the cracked radiator hose and the 2 teenagers and all their belongings. Driving away from the lot towards something Logan didn't know the shape of. About what it means to do the right thing when nobody is watching. And what it means when later, it turns out that more people were watching than you knew. He talked for a while. The evening was warm. A bird was going in the trees somewhere. Logan stood in the quiet and felt his father's particular presence, not supernatural. Not mystical, just the presence of someone you've known deeply enough that they become part of the way you see things. A lens, a standard. He said, I think I understand now what you meant. Ease. About the right kind of wait. He waited, the way you wait when you're hoping the world will give you something back. Ease. It didn't answer, it never did. But the evening stayed warm. Ease. And the bird kept going in the trees, and Logan stood there a while longer before he walked back to his truck. Ease. He had a fuel injector to look at in the morning. The shop didn't run itself. Ease. And Logan Carter, 20 years old, son of a man he would spend his whole life trying to be worthy of, drove home through the Montana evening with all four windows down and the radio finally on. He's letting the music be just music, letting the dark be just dark. He's letting the week be what it had been and letting tomorrow be what it would be. Clean, simple. His. The fuel injector took most of Saturday morning. Ease. It was a finicky job on a finicky engine, a 2009 Dodge that had been neglected by 3 consecutive owners. Ease. Each of whom had passed the problem forward like a letter nobody wanted to open. Ease. Logan diagnosed it clean, ordered the right part Thursday. Ease. Had it in his hands by Friday afternoon and spent Saturday with his forearms deep in the engine bay, coaxing a system back into cooperation that had been running wrong for so long it had almost forgotten what right felt like. He understood that feeling. When it finally turned over clean, smooth, idle, no stumble, the engine, finding its rhythm and holding it, he stood back and listened to it run. That sound, that particular sound of something corrected. Something restored to the function it was built for. He never got tired of it. His father had told him once that the day you stop feeling something a fixed engine turns over is the day you should find different work. Logan had not reached that day. He did not think he would. He was wiping down the engine bay when Jackson called. 3 weeks had passed since the gathering in Billings. 3 weeks since Briggs's indictment. 3 weeks since Logan had stood in front of 4,000 people and felt the silence of them move through him like something physical. The world had not gone entirely quiet. The story still moved through certain corners of the internet. Still surfaced occasionally in news feeds. Still generated the occasional voicemail from a number he didn't recognize, but it had settled. The acute phase had ended. Life had reasserted its ordinary rhythms with the patient persistence that ordinary life always manages. Eventually, if you let it. He answered the call with grease on his hands. Jackson, Logan. A pause that had something in it not bad. But waited. I'm going to be in Crestwood this afternoon. I'd like to come by the shop, if that's all right. You're always welcome, Logan said. Is everything okay? Everything is fine. Better than fine. Actually. There's something I want to tell you in person. Another pause. And Emily is with me. She wants to see you. Logan felt something move through his chest, the specific warmth of hearing that Emily was well enough to travel. Well enough to be on the road with her husband. Well enough to come back to the place where the story had started. I'll be here, he said. I'm always here. They arrived at 2 in the afternoon. Jackson on his bike, Emily in a truck driven by one of Jackson's people she wasn't riding yet. Her wrist still in a phase of healing that made the vibration of a motorcycle inadvisable. Though Logan could tell from the way she looked at Jackson's bike when she got out of the truck that this was a temporary situation she intended to resolve as soon as medically permitted. She looked different from the hospital. Better. Not just physically, though, that too. The bruising faded to almost nothing. The wrists unwrapped and moving freely, but in the way she carried herself. The weight that had been on her in that hospital room. The particular weight of someone who has been reduced to helplessness and is still reckoning with what that felt like. Had shifted, not gone, rearranged into something she was carrying differently. More upright, more forward. When she saw Logan, she crossed the lot without hesitation and hugged him. Which he hadn't expected, and which he handled by standing straight and hugging her back because there was no correct alternative. You look like you've been working, she said, stepping back and looking at his hands. Fuel injector, how'd it go? Clean, idle, happy ending. She smiled at that, a real one. He's wide and unguarded. Good. That's good. She looked around the shop, taking it in the way she took everything in with genuine attention. He's the kind of person who is actually present in the rooms they enter. This is where he raised you, she said. Not quite a question. Ease. This is where he raised me, Logan confirmed. She looked at the coffee mug on the shelf above the stove in the small back room visible through the interior door. Ease. She looked at the organization of the tools on the pegboard, the careful, particular order of a man who knew where everything was and needed to know without looking. Ease. She looked at all of it the way a person looks at a place when they understand it is a language. Ease. And they are reading it. He did a good job, she said quietly. Ease. Jackson came in behind her. He shook Logan's hand with the same firm grip as always. Ease. But something in his face was different today. Less guarded. Ease. The controlled weight still there, but lighter under it, the weight of a man who has been carrying a specific fear for a long time and has recently put it down. Ease. Sit down if you want, Logan said, gesturing to the shop stools. Ease. In a minute, Jackson said. First, I have something for you. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and brought out an envelope. Ease. Plain white. Logan's name written on it in handwriting that was deliberate and careful. Ease. Don't open it yet, Jackson said. Hear me out first. Logan set the envelope on the workbench and waited. Ease. The trial date has been set, Jackson began. Briggs and his people. Federal court. Billings, 8 months from now. Marsh says the case is as solid as he's seen. Ease. The 3 men who physically took Emily have all turned state's evidence. Ease. Briggs's communication records are in evidence. Dale Whitmer's testimony is in evidence. He paused. Ease. It's over, Logan. Not in the courtroom sense, that will take its time. Ease. But the outcome is not in question. Marsh told me privately this week that Briggs will die in federal prison. A beat. Ease. He is 61 years old. Logan absorbed that. Ease. The specific finality of it. Harlan Briggs, a man Logan had never met and hoped never to meet. Ease. A man who had been the dark organizing principle behind the worst week of Emily's life and the strangest week of Logan's, was 61 years old and would die in federal custody. Ease. Logan felt nothing triumphant about it. What he felt was closer to the feeling after the engine turns over clean. Ease. Correctness. Restoration. A thing put back into the function it should have held all along. Ease. And the people who carried it out? Logan asked. Reduced sentences in exchange for cooperation, Jackson said. Federal minimums. They'll do time, not enough time. Ease by most measures. But time, he paused. I've made my peace with that. Ease. Emily has made her peace with that. The justice that was available has been applied. Ease. I'm not going to spend my energy fighting what I can't change when there's still so much I can. Logan looked at him. Ease, that's not an easy thing to arrive at. No, Jackson said simply. Ease. It took me 3 weeks and a lot of conversations with Emily and one very long drive alone that I'd rather not repeat. The corner of his mouth moved. Ease. But I got there. Emily, sitting on the stool near the workbench, said, he got there because I told him that if he spent the rest of his life angry about the inadequacy of the sentence, Briggs would still be running him from inside a federal cell. And I refused to let that happen. Logan looked at her. You told him that. Several times, she said. He's stubborn, I'm aware, Jackson said. He's without any edge whatsoever. He got there, Emily said. And looked at Jackson with the particular expression of a person who has known someone long enough to love both who they are and who they are capable of becoming. He got there. Logan opened the envelope when they asked him to. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not a letter exactly. More a document. He read it twice before he looked up. This is, he stopped. Read it a third time to make sure he understood it correctly. It's the deed to the parcel of land adjacent to your property, Jackson said. The half-acre on the north side of your lot that you've been renting from a trust for the last 3 years. The trust transferred it. A pause. To you. Outright. Logan set the paper down on the workbench. He looked at it. Don't, Jackson said. And his voice was gentle but firm. Don't tell me it's too much. Don't tell me you don't need it. Don't tell me you were just doing what anyone would have done, because we have established, empirically, that you were not doing what anyone would have done. He held Logan's gaze. You have been renting that parcel for 3 years. You need it for the expansion bay you've been planning. Your father talked about that expansion for 10 years and never had the capital to make the land purchase. You have the skill and the work ethic and the customer base. You have everything except the land. He paused. Now you have the land. Logan looked at Emily. Ease. She was watching him with the same unguarded expression she'd had from the moment she walked in. Ease, was this your idea? He asked her. It was a joint idea, she said. Ease, but yes, I made the calls. Logan looked at the deed again. Ease, his name on it. The parcel he'd been paying monthly for 3 years. Ease, the parcel his father had walked the edges of and said someday. Ease. Logan, someday we get that piece and we build the second bay and we stop turning work away. Ease. The parcel he'd been paying for since he took over the lease, because the monthly payment was manageable, even if the purchase price wasn't. Ease. Because having it available was better than not having it, even if owning it felt like a horizon he'd never quite reach. Ease. He felt something behind his eyes that he dealt with by pressing his thumb firmly into the edge of the workbench and holding it there. Ease. I don't know what to say, he said. Say you'll build the bay, Emily said. Ease. I'll build the bay, he said immediately. She smiled. Ease. Good. That was the only acceptable answer. Jackson put his hand on Logan's shoulder briefly. Ease. Firmly, the way men who aren't demonstrative touch each other when the moment is larger than the available vocabulary. Ease. Then he removed it. There's one more thing, Jackson said. Ease. And this one isn't a gift. This one is a conversation. Logan straightened. Ease. All right, Marsh called me this week, Jackson said. Ease. He's been talking to people at the U.S. Attorney's Office about how this case came together. Ease. About the chain of events from your 911 call forward. Ease. About how a single person acting on instinct with no institutional backing. Ease. No authority, no training set in motion a sequence that closed a 14-month investigation. He paused. Ease. There are people in that office who want to talk to you. Ease. Not as a witness, the testimony phase is covered. Ease. As something else. He let that sit. They've been working on a community liaison program. Ease. People who can operate in the spaces between institutions. Ease. In communities where official presence creates friction. Ease. People who are trusted because they've earned it. People who have demonstrated, ease, concretely, that they can act under pressure with judgment. He paused again. Ease. They want to talk to you about what that could look like. Whether there's something more formal you might want to be part of. Ease, in whatever way makes sense for your life here. Logan was quiet for a long moment. I'm a mechanic, he said. I know, Jackson said. Ease. They know. That's not what they're asking you to stop being. What are they asking? They're asking if you'd be willing to have a conversation, Jackson said. Ease. That's all. One conversation. You ask whatever you want, ease, and you say yes or no, and nobody holds it against you either way. Ease. Marsh vouches for that, and I second it. Logan looked at the deed on the workbench. Ease. He looked at the coffee mug on the shelf. He looked at his hands, the grease lines. Ease. The bolt cutter calluses that had faded now but left a memory in the skin. Ease. He thought about what his father said about the right kind of weight. Ease. He thought about Dale Whitmer sitting on that stool with his hands on his knees. Ease. Carrying something 8 weeks too long. He thought about a woman saying run and meaning please don't. Ease. I'll have the conversation, he said. Jackson exhaled, not relieved. Ease. Exactly. More like a man who had been right about something and was experiencing the quiet satisfaction of accuracy. Ease. Good, he said. One conversation, Logan clarified. Ease. I'm not signing anything. I'm not committing to anything. Ease. I'm listening. That's all anyone's asking, Jackson said. Ease. All right then, they stayed for another hour. Ease. Emily walked the shop the way she'd been wanting to since she arrived. Ease. Touching things occasionally with the careful curiosity of a woman who understands that objects hold the residue of the people who use them. Ease. She stood in front of the pegboard of tools for a moment and said nothing. Ease. She looked at the chipped handle mug and said, "Don't ever move that." "I won't," Logan said. Ease. Good. Jackson sat on the stool and talked to Logan about the expansion bay practical things. Ease. Load-bearing questions, whether the north parcel's soil grade would require foundation work before building. Ease. He knew more about construction than Logan expected. Ease. Which Logan mentioned. I built our first chapter house myself, Jackson said. Ease. Framing, roofing, electrical rough-in. I was 24. Ease. It took 11 months, and it looked terrible, but it held. He paused. Ease. Still holding, actually. What chapter? Logan asked. Ease. Oregon. Outside Portland, 1,000. 998. He smiled, a full one. Ease. The rare kind that went all the way to his eyes. I was a young man who believed that if you wanted something real, you built it yourself, and you built it to last. My father believed the same thing, Logan said. I know, Jackson said. I can tell by how he built you. Logan looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked up. Can I ask you something? He said. Ask. The morning you rode into Crestwood. The first morning, after the phone call. You came with your people behind you, and you stopped in my lot. And you put your hand out. Logan paused. What were you thinking? In that moment? Before you knew anything about me except the one thing you knew. Jackson considered this. With the seriousness it deserved, not reaching for a quick answer. Sitting with the question until he had the honest one. I was thinking about Emily, he said. About what she would have looked like in those trees. About what 30 hours of that does to a person. About how afraid she must have been. He paused. And I was thinking that a 20-year-old kid had walked into that and not walked back out until she was free. And I was thinking, what kind of person does that? Not because I doubted it, because I needed to see it. I needed to put a face to that kind of person and understand that it still exists. His voice went quiet. I've been in the world I've been in for 30 years. You see a lot of the wrong kind of person in 30 years. It does something to your faith in the other kind. He looked at Logan directly. I drove to your lot because I needed to see you, not to judge you. To replenish something. Does that make sense? Yes, Logan said. You replenished it, Jackson said. You and your bolt cutters and your grease-stained hands and your absolute inability to do the calculating thing. He paused. Every person who rode to that field outside Billings, they came for the same reason. Not to celebrate a victory. To replenish something they were afraid they were losing. Logan felt the weight of that in his chest. The responsibility of it. The strange privilege of being the thing that replenished someone's faith in human beings, not by being exceptional, but by being ordinary in the precise moment when ordinary decency was the rarest thing in the world. I'm going to disappoint people eventually, Logan said. If they expect too much, they don't expect you to be a saint, Jackson said. And his voice carried the authority of a man who understood this distinction from decades of hard experience. They expect you to be a person who does the right thing when it costs something. That's all they saw. That's all they're holding on to. The rest of it, the expansion bay, the conversations with the U.S. attorney's office, whatever your life becomes, none of that changes what already happened. What you already did. He paused. Nobody can take a Tuesday afternoon in July away from you. It happened. It's permanent. Everything else is just what comes after. They left at 4. Jackson on his bike, Emily in the truck, pulling out of the gravel lot with the unhurried ease of people who have said what they came to say and don't need the exit to carry additional weight. Logan stood at the bay door and watched them go. He held the deed in one hand. His father's voice somewhere in the back of his mind. The version of his father that lived in the shop and in the tools and in the particular quality of afternoon light coming through the open bay door, that voice saying something he'd said 100 times in 100 contexts, and that Logan only now, standing here with a deed in his hand and 3 weeks of extraordinary living behind him, understood in its full dimension. You do the work that's in front of you. All of it, every piece of it, and you trust that the work adds up to something. He walked to the workbench. He set the deed down carefully in the flat drawer where he kept his most important paperwork, insurance documents, lease agreements, his father's original business license. He put the deed in there and closed the drawer. Then he picked up the fuel injector receipt from the counter and filed it where receipts went. He got the broom and swept the bay. He topped off the hydraulic fluid in the lift. He wrote tomorrow's work list on the whiteboard near the door, 3 appointments starting at 8. A tire rotation, a coolant flush, a clutch that had been slipping on a Jeep belonging to a high school teacher named Barbara, who had been nursing it along on a teacher's salary for 6 months because the timing was never right. The timing was right now. Logan had squeezed her in. He did all of these things, the ordinary things, the unspectacular infrastructure of a life built around reliable work and honest accounting. Ease. He did them carefully. He did them right, because that was the only way he knew how to do them. Ease. And because his father had taught him that the way you do the small things is the way you do everything. Ease. And if you let the small things go ragged, you are practicing for the large things to go ragged too. Ease. It was almost 6 when his phone buzzed. Ease. Not a call. A text. From a number he'd saved 3 weeks ago under the name Ray Oregon. Ease. Ray was the man from the gathering. The man who'd ridden from Oregon and told Logan he was going to call his son that night and tell him this story. Ease, the text said, called my son that night like I said I would. Ease, we talked for 2 hours. First real conversation in 10 years. Ease. He's coming to visit next month. Thought you should know. Ease, Ray. Logan sat on the tailgate of his truck in the lot and read that text 3 times. Ease. Then he typed back, that's the best thing I've heard all month. Ease. Give him a handshake from me when he gets there. Ray replied 20 seconds later with a single word. Ease. Done. Logan set the phone down on the tailgate beside him. Ease. He looked at the lot, the gravel. Ease. The bay doors. Ease. The sign above the entrance with his father's name and his name below it. Ease. The 2-name sign he'd kept exactly as his father had made it, because changing it had never felt like the right thing to do, and probably never would. Ease. He looked at the north parcel. Half an acre. Flat, workable, is now on paper. He could already see it, the second bay. Ease. The expanded lift system. The space that would let him take on the work he'd been turning away for 2 years because there was only one of him in one bay and 24 hours in a day. Ease. His father's 10-year dream, reduced now to a planning timeline and a building permit application. Ease. Something he could hold in his hands and make real before winter if he pushed. Ease. He sat with that for a moment, the version of the future that had just become possible. Ease. Then he thought about something Emily had said in the hospital when you know. Ease. You know, and about Jackson saying what you already did is permanent. Ease. Nobody can take it away, and about Marsh saying, I've seen it up close, and I'm telling you it's not common. And about Gerald with his hat in both hands saying, your father would have done exactly what you did, and about Ray's son. Ease. Coming to visit next month after 10 years of distance. Ease. Because an old man on a motorcycle from Oregon had heard a story about a 20-year-old mechanic with a bolt cutter and had let it change something in him. Ease. Logan Carter was 20 years old. He had grease in the creases of his palms. Ease. He owned a half-acre of Montana land. He had a meeting scheduled with a federal attorney's office that he had not yet decided what to do about. He had a second bay to build and a clutch to fix in the morning and a coffee mug on a shelf that he would never move. Ease. He had done one thing, one specific thing on one specific Tuesday. He's in a forest he hadn't been looking for a woman he hadn't known. He's at a cost he hadn't calculated because he hadn't stopped to calculate it. Ease. And that one thing had moved through the world the way true things move, not loudly. Ease. Not in straight lines, not through the channels that are built for such movements. Ease, but sideways and diagonally, and through brake jobs and phone calls, and old men calling estranged sons, and federal cases closing, and a 61-year-old criminal spending the rest of his life in a cell, and a retired rancher sitting on a bench in Ease. Crestwood laughing with a stranger from Wyoming on a Saturday night. Ease. One thing, one bolt cutter, one decision made in the absence of calculation. Ease. In the presence of someone who needed help. Logan picked up his phone. Ease. He looked at Ray's last message one more time. Then he looked at the bay doors. Ease. Then he looked at the north parcel. Then he looked at the sky above Crestwood. Ease. Montana, which was doing what Montana skies do in the early evening, turning colors that didn't have names. Ease. The kind of colors that make a person understand, without language for it. Ease. That the world is larger and more serious and more beautiful than any single life can fully account for. Ease. He breathed it in. He let it be what it was. Then Logan Carter got off the tailgate. Ease went inside his shop and turned off the lights. Because the work was done for today. Ease. And tomorrow's work was already written on the whiteboard. Ease. And a man who does what's in front of him doesn't need to stand in the dark, marveling at what's behind him. Ease. He already knew what was behind him. He had built it himself. Ease. One decision at a time, starting with the simplest and the most permanent, the decision to stay.